Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and my only regret is I wasn't able to be here yesterday and stay overnight because I love this hotel. It's a beautiful place, beautiful views. And what I wanted to start with was talking about when I did work for Bernie Sanders. I lived in Alexandria, Virginia, and my wife and I had a very nice 1950s brick and block home. And when we moved in, it was about 2008, and we had just gotten married. And my work being in energy, I was very excited about all the things I was going to do with my home. Would I be able to do solar? Could I do some insulation? Could we get a new boiler? What were the options? And I went to a workshop that we had convened, and it was with energy experts and a number of different federal and state and other officials. And there was a great presentation about all the different technologies that were out there that you could do with your home. And so I went up to one of the presenters afterwards and I said, well, this is great. I want to find out, how do I pay for this? How can I finance some of these improvements? And they said, well, you should get a home equity loan. I said, well, we just bought our home, so we have no equity. He said, well, you could look at doing maybe a credit card. And I said, well, that doesn't sound like a really good opportunity to pay for these long-term investments. And it turned out there really were no, at that point in time where I lived, really great financing options for somebody in my situation. So fast forward to 2013, and my wife and I, and now our son, were able to move back to Vermont, and I became Deputy Commissioner of the Public Service Department at that time. And I was very, very excited, because this is a house we want to stay in for a long time. So I asked the same questions again. You know, what can I do, and how can I pay for it? And lo and behold, there were options, and it was very exciting. I was able to get unsecured financing through my credit union, my local credit union. We've done solar hot water, we've done solar PV. We replaced our boiler with a brand new Energy Star version. We've done LED lights, we've done cold climate heat pump. We were one of the first customers, I think, in Vermont to do the indoor multi-unit to one outdoor unit. One of the first 10 or so, at least with the company that I purchased it through. So we've maxed out our financing. We have what I consider to be kind of a hybrid home, which is where I think a lot of homes in Vermont are heading, where we're using more and more renewable electricity, more and more renewable fuels to kind of move fossil to the backup system or a supplementary system as opposed to a primary. And so I think that in a kind of a microcosm is what I'm seeing as what I would say is the energy revolution in Vermont. So my old boss talks a lot about the political revolution, and he is my neighbor. So the Secret Service are all over our neighborhood whenever he's home, and it's a very exciting time in Vermont if you live in Bernie's neighborhood. But what I would say is when take this revolution back, it all began with energy efficiency. And Scott Johnstone's here, Efficiency Vermont. That's kind of where the foundation is for energy policy in Vermont. And in the year 2000 and the investments we've made since, we're using some 13+% less electricity today than we would be otherwise if we hadn't been making those investments. So that's the backbone and the foundation for all the work that we do. And we've got a fairly strong weatherization program. States in northern New England, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, lots of customers on heating fuels, not a whole lot of natural gas infrastructure in Vermont. So a lot of very expensive and volatile fuel sources, pretty good history of weatherization in Vermont. Governor Shumlin, my current boss, takes office in 2011, January of 2011. He ran his campaign on the basis of closing Vermont Yankee, aging nuclear power plant, moving aggressively with efficiency and renewable energy, and creating jobs. And his promise was, we will bring costs down, we will create new jobs, we will move to renewables, and we will close the nuclear plant. And so that was 2011. A lot of people thought he was crazy. And so today, a lot of those things have actually begun to happen, or have happened. The nuclear plant is closed. Vermont Yankee is closed. That's a 600+ megawatt plant, part of the electric grid in Vermont. At one point was 70+% of our in-state generation. It is gone. It does not operate anymore. We have 10 times the number of solar panels in Vermont now than we did, more than we did when the governor took office in 2011. We've got 20 times more wind power generation than when the governor took office. We continue to make really strong investments in energy efficiency. We just had a report come out that says we've got 17,700 clean energy jobs, about half of those in energy efficiency and the rest in renewables and carbon management and other clean technologies. What that means in the real world in Vermont is if there were 17 Vermonters in this room, one of them at least is working in the clean energy field. 6% or so of our economy is now clean energy jobs. And something that Taylor said about the circular economy, with energy efficiency investments in Vermont, we know that every dollar goes in, we keep about 80% of that in our economy. If we send a dollar out to pay for fossil fuel, to pay for heating oil, to pay for gasoline, that dollar is going out of our economy. We're not seeing a whole lot of the value there. So we're seeing the results. Electric rates. 3 out of the last 4 years, Vermont's electric rates as a state have come down. Amazing accomplishment at a time we're making all this progress with renewables and efficiency. And that's at a time when a number of folks in this room know in New England where there's been quite a bit of volatility in electric rates. And we've been able to, through long-term stable contracts, through other smart investments, 3 or 4 years, rates are going down. And we're starting to see, and this is my slide here, we're starting to see the impact of these technologies on the grid. So this is from Velco, which is our statewide transmission utility. And they work with all of the distribution utilities in Vermont. And as you can see, this is just a particular day that they picked out, and I've seen data that complements this that's longer term. We are beginning to flatten out some of the peak. Solar is having, and energy efficiency is having, a real impact on our grid. And a couple of years ago, Governor Shumlin, in his State of the State address, was able to say that Vermonters had avoided $400 million worth of transmission investments that had previously been on the table, that Velco had previously thought we needed, that ISO New England previously thought we needed. We were able to take those off the table due to our work looking at the investments we'd made in efficiency and solar and quantifying that and saying to ISO, actually, we don't have a need in this area and this area because of these investments. So that's $400 million. We pay about 4% of the regional transmission costs, so directly saving $16 million for ratepayers in Vermont and saving ratepayers in this room and elsewhere in the region money as well. And that's a model we're looking to export. I know Velco is talking a lot with ISO New England. We're seeing in some areas of Vermont, Rutland, Vermont is now the solar capital of New England, thanks to investments made by our distribution utility, Green Mountain Power. We are seeing the peak move from the afternoon to the early evening because of solar. We're seeing it on the grid. And it's making things like energy storage all the more important because we may need those technologies to complement solar to keep the value proposition going. So that's all what we're doing now, but I kind of want to get to the future now part of this conversation. And for us, that really goes to what's a bill that became law last year called Act 56. And my proudest accomplishment as a professional was working on that bill. And when I took the job, when I was moving from Bernie's office to become Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Public Service, I had a conversation with Asa Hopkins. Maybe some people in the room know Asa. He's probably one of the most brilliant people I know. I do law and politics and policy. He knows data and numbers and physics. He's a great, smart energy data cruncher and thinker. And what he and I talked about when I was coming up to work at the department where he works, and he had previously been in DC, I said, well, we've got to have a renewable portfolio standard in Vermont. And he said, he agreed with me, but of course, unfortunately, they had tried that a couple years prior in 2012, and it had failed. And the conversation was all about, if we move to a renewable portfolio standard, rates are going to go up, and costs are going to go up. And so my first conversation when I came into my job as Deputy Commissioner with the Chief of Staff, I said, well, we got to try for a renewable portfolio standard. And you can imagine the response I got with that type of dynamic. And Vermont, we like to be first a lot of times. We were first state to legalize gay marriage through the legislature, not a court decision. We're the first state to label GMOs, require GMO labeling. With RPS, we were trying to be the 30th state, not the first. And it had been, we'd had a good policy to build out renewables and sell renewable energy credits into the market, so we were seeing some new generation. And I remember at the end of the 2014 session, we had just passed a good bill on net metering. I had a conversation with one of our energy advocates, nonprofit energy advocate in the State House. I said, next year we're coming back, we're going to do a renewable portfolio standard. And he laughed at me. And he probably laughed with good reason, but it turned out over the summer, opportunity intervened. And we had the renewable energy credit markets and some of the states that are purchasing some of our credits starting to say, we're not sure if you're participating in a fair way in the market. And we were ready with a policy response. And that policy response became Act 56. It was hard. I know a lot of people think Vermont's a progressive state. Bernie Sanders, Ben and Jerry's, must be easy to get things done. It's not easy to get things done in Vermont. We have all the same challenges around energy policy and then some that everybody else does. The bill that we passed and that I view as kind of foundational for our future progress does a few things. It does do a renewable portfolio standard, and being 30th, you get to learn some of the lessons from Massachusetts, from New Hampshire, states that have gone before us. So we've got a big overall target, and we've got a distributed generation target, just like everybody else. The piece that's innovative is we said, and I think we're the first state to do this, for the first time, our distribution utilities are going to have a requirement, along with those renewable generation requirements, to actually help their customers reduce fossil fuel use in the heating and transportation sectors. They are going to have to do weatherization, cold climate heat pumps, biomass, other types of energy technologies, electric charging stations for electric vehicles. They're going to have to play a role because electricity, for us at least, is not about turning the lights on anymore. Not only about turning the lights on. It's about the electric vehicle, it's about the cold climate heat pump, it's about energy storage. And this law, for the first time, put those distribution utilities in the position of helping to drive that change. And what we're talking about, if this is implemented properly over a period of 15 years, is tens of thousands of homes in Vermont will get cold climate heat pumps and weatherization. And the reason we were able to get there is instead of having a conversation about rate increases, if we'd have lost access to the renewable credit market, we would have had a 6% rate increase. So we had a 6% rate risk. The policy we designed actually is, if it's done correctly, rate negative over the long term, because if we do use the grid we have more efficiently, if we flatten that load curve, and then we do off-peak charging for electric vehicles and using our cold climate heat pumps responsibly, we have essentially the third shift in a factory that doesn't cost any more to build the factory. So we're going to get, every ratepayer is going to get a benefit from that, and that was the underpinnings of that bill. So we were able to do that. I'm excited about the progress that I think we're about to make through that. It raises some interesting questions, one of which is for our efficiency utility. If they're going to be a good partner in this effort, we may need to consider whether they get to work more holistically on heating and transportation as opposed to being constrained to using electric ratepayer dollars for electric efficiency. That's one of the policy questions that's on the table now in Vermont and that's teed up. But on the point of things being hard in Vermont, I do just want to emphasize that. I came yesterday from a bill signing of a bill that the governor originally vetoed. And actually, we were able to get back into the legislature and fix it. Would have established a de facto wind moratorium in Vermont, in addition to some good things around energy siting that we were trying to make happen, getting communities involved and engaged, giving them more say in our siting process. We do have challenges. We have challenges around energy siting. We have challenges when it comes to continuing our investments in efficiency. Just a year ago, legislators were proposing capping our investments in efficiency. So all the same challenges that play out politically in other states, we have as well. And it's just not an easy thing. And sometimes when a company is very successful, so I say this, I think I've worked for the most famous socialist in the country, right? But we live in a capitalist society. We're supposed to celebrate success. And the renewable businesses, the energy efficiency businesses that are creating jobs in Vermont often are demonized instead of celebrated by some of the folks who are on the other side of that conversation. And in my view, the fossil fuel industry's had 100+ years of political and economic hegemony in this country, and certainly in most of our states. And we should want, as environmentalists, as energy, renewable energy advocates, energy efficiency advocates, climate advocates, we should want the renewable industry and the energy efficiency industry to meet and exceed the political and economic clout that the fossil fuel industry has, because if we don't achieve that, we don't achieve anything, in my view. So that's one of the struggles that we have in Vermont as we're looking at it. And I'll just close by saying that one of the things I'm excited about, and one of the things I hope that you all are going to work with us on, and we're excited to work with you on, is regional cooperation. We have a hot conversation around carbon pricing in Vermont. We've obviously done that together on electricity. We haven't done it yet on transportation or heating. I know at least in the transportation sector, there's a vigorous conversation going on. And if I could leave you with any point today, I would say that it's imperative, if we're ever going to make progress in these other sectors, to have that type of regional cooperation. I hope you all can play a role along with us in making that happen. So thank you very much. Excited to be here, excited for the panel and the questions.